It's Friday night. It's the preview show. It's the No Nay Never podcast.
Hello and welcome to the preview show from the No Nay Never podcast. I'm producer Matt, sitting in for Natalie this week, but I'm joined as ever by Statman Dave Roberts. Dave, good evening.
Good evening, Matt. Good to be back and good to have you here for a change.
It is. I was trying to cast my mind back to the last one I did. I think I did one possibly during Project Restart in the hazy days of the summer. But Natalie's been available just about for the last 6 or 7 months. So no, it's good to be back on air, as it were. And you know, these are coming thick and fast. These preview shows we've got with the Fulham match being slotted in now. We've got double game weeks for the rest of the month. So I got my work cut out to keep everyone informed of what's coming up. Looking back very briefly at last night's match, Dave, it wasn't too bad a result and it wasn't too bad a performance, I didn't think. What do you think?
It was always going to be tough when we conceded a goal so early against a team like City. If we could have kept it tighter for longer, it might have been different. We did just concede the 2 goals in the game. It could have potentially been more. We didn't really have any chances at the other end. Is it similar in some ways to the Chelsea one? Again, once they went in front, it was going to be tough to get back into the game, but only 1 goal down, there's always that chance. We didn't get a tonking from City as we have done in sometimes in the past, but it was probably an expected result in some ways in the end, and we couldn't quite pull off the same sort of miracle that we did at Anfield against Liverpool.
No, I think I was thinking before about these matches, where we get the results against these traditional big six. That you seem to be kind of like almost 1 a season, 2 at a push. So with the win at the Emirates and the win at Anfield, I think we're kind of used up all our lucky chips, perhaps for this season. So in our last preview show, we posed a quiz question for you, which was: which player scored Burnley's goal in the second half of the 6-1 home defeat to Manchester City back in the spring of 2010? And the answer to that question, Dave, was?
It was a very wet day. The answer was Stephen Fletcher got that goal. That was the match where City raced to a 3-0 lead after 7 minutes. They were 5-0 up at half-time, and we did slightly better after the break. But despite drawing the second half 1-1, Turf Moor was definitely not a happy place that day.
You know, it was kind of a wet place as well, I seem to remember. I think
there was a deluge. Yeah, the pitch wasn't quite as good and didn't hold the water quite as well then, so there were puddles everywhere. And it was looking at one point like, I think we were shouting for it at one point for the referee to call the game off, but it did seem to die off a little bit in the second half, and there was no real danger of that in the end. And disappointing day, really.
Yeah. Correct answers, some usual suspects again, I think.
Yes, we had Adrian Caton again, got the correct answer, as did David Entwistle, and John Robertson was also back in touch after a couple of weeks with not getting the correct answer. So well done to those 3.
And of course, we will have another quiz question for you at the end of the show.
Opposition stats.
So, moving on to look at the next match in this busy schedule, and it is, of course, Brighton and Hove Albion at home, the second of 3 matches at the Turf in a week. This Saturday, the 6th of February, and it's a rarity. It's a 3 o'clock Saturday kickoff, and it's also live on Sky Sports. So, Dave, what can you tell us about the recent history between Burnley and Brighton?
Well, there have been 7 meetings between Burnley and Brighton and Hove Albion at Turf Moor since 2009. 4 of those were in the Championship, and the 3 most recent meetings at Turf Moor have all been in the Premier League. Burnley have won 2, drawn 3 and lost 2 of Brighton's most recent trips to Turf Moor. Honours have been fairly even during that time, with a win each and 2 draws in the 4 most recent Championship games, as well as a win each and 1 draw in the 3 previous Premier League games over the last 3 seasons. They're also the only 3 seasons that both clubs have been together in the top flight. Burnley's last and only top flight win was achieved in December 2018 with a 1-0 win, and Brighton's only top flight win at Turf Moor is the corresponding fixture from last season, Goals from Yves Bissouma and Aaron Connolly, either side of Chris Wood's goal, gave the Seagulls a 2-1 away win when the two teams met last in the Premier League. That was the last game of last season back in July.
Yeah, I think we'd finally got to our kind of on the beach moment by that point, seem to remember.
Highlights and lowlights.
Moving on to the next section, it's our highlight and lowlight. And we're going back to highlights first this week.
I'm keeping you on your toes, yes. Highlight first this week. For our highlight, we've chosen Burnley's one and only top-flight home win over Brighton from December 2018, which we mentioned just before. Following a tough start to the season, it was a welcome victory, which ended a dismal run of 8 games without a win, and also lifted Burnley out of the bottom 3. The winning goal, which came before half-time in front of the cricket field stand, was hardly a classic. Jack Cork's shot found its way past Matt Ryan off James Tarkowski's midriff, but they all count, and we gladly accepted the goal and the clean sheet which combined to earn the much-needed win.
And what is our low light for this week?
I've gone a little bit further back in time for our low light. We selected a disappointing opening day defeat to the Seagulls at Turf Moor from the 2002-2003 season. Steve Melton gave the visitors the lead in the first half, and following Arthur Naheri's dismissal on 51 minutes, Albion added 2 more goals through Paul Brooker and Bobby Zamora. Although Lee Briscoe netted in the final minute to pull a goal back, it was too little too late, meaning we left Turf Moor to reflect on a below-par performance and a dismal start to the season.
Oh dear.
Fixture Flashback.
So moving on, our next section is our newish feature, the Fixture Flashback. Now, throughout the second half of this season, we are bringing you a brand new fixture. A brand new feature, Fixture Flashback. It's a chance for you to get involved in the show. Each week, we're asking you to send us your matchday memories from a particular game from the past against our next opponents so that we can feature them on the relevant preview show. Now, ideally, we'd like you to record your voice and send it through to us. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then we'll also take a typed up written memory and we will read them out. And here is this week's.
Well, Brighton at home this weekend, usually quite a tedious fixture, 0-0 or 1-0 either way. Apart from the rare sight of a Joe Hart clean sheet, probably the best abiding memory of Brighton at home was another 0-0 draw in the European qualification season. So it's towards the back end of the season, 2018. I think we knew a point would all but get us there, providing Chelsea knocked Southampton out in the FA Cup. I think Brighton wanted a 0-0 to keep them that much close to safety. And it was a game where you could tell that both teams were happy with a 0-0 draw, but 1 point closer to Europe, so that's got to be the happiest memory for me.
Now, we won't have a preview show for the FA Cup game against Bournemouth on Tuesday, so our next Premier League match is the trip to Selhurst Park to play Crystal Palace next Saturday the 13th. So if you have a memory of an away day at Selhurst Park and you'd like to share it with us, then you can record and send it through to us at podcast@nonamenever.net, and we will include it in next week's preview show.
Heroes and villains.
Okay, moving on to the next section, and it's our heroes and villains. Or should I say, Dave, heroes?
Yes, for our hero this week, we don't just have one, we've got 5. I've gone all out this week. Burnley all but guaranteed the club's first foray into European competition with a 0-0 draw at Turf Moor in April 2018 against a Brighton side which also included Dale Stephens. Even before the match, there were already opportunistic merchandise sellers with Claret's Invasion of Europe scarves for sale. But the point on the day, the 0-0 draw, meant that Burnley increased the gap over Everton in 8th place to 6 points, with 2 games to play. And we also had a superior goal difference of +12 against -3. Sean Dyche could barely hide his smile when asked about the subject in the post-match interview. So for keeping a clean sheet that day and earning us a very valuable point, Nick Pope and the starting back 4 of Matt Lowton, Kevin Long, who played that day alongside James Tarkowski and Stephen Ward, are our heroes for this week.
Oh, seems a long time ago now, doesn't it, that European adventure? And who is our villain for this this week, Dave?
Well, we like a pantomime villain here on the No Name Never preview show, and we think we have just the man to fit the bill for this episode. Back in 2012, Brighton were managed by hot-headed Uruguayan Gus Poyet, and with his visiting team trailing 1-0 with 5 minutes to play, he proceeded to storm down the touchline and down the tunnel. He certainly hadn't been asked to leave the touchline by the referee or fourth official and failed to explain his actions in the post-match press conference. So to this day, we're all still a little bit unsure exactly what happened to cause this unusual course of action, which surprised and amused the Turf Moor faithful in equal measure, and also seemed to puzzle the visiting fans. However, it wasn't the first time we'd seen this type of behaviour from the Brighton boss. In the reverse fixture, earlier in the season, he threw his coat down to the ground and stormed off halfway through the first half, after 2 Brighton players, including future Claret Ashley Barnes, had been sent off. So for his second touchline tantrum of the season, we think we're well within our rights to have Gus Poyet as our villain this week.
I think he was just trying to beat the traffic.
Maybe.
I think he was trying to get up Manchester Road before everybody else. And to round off this section of this show, who is going to be the man in the middle on Saturday for us?
We've got Anthony Taylor of Wythenshawe. He's going to be the man in charge of this Saturday's home game against Brighton. It's actually the third time he's refereed a Burnley match so far this season, so we'll have gone through his stats a couple of times before, so I'll not bore you too much with them in this episode. But the previous 2 occasions both ended in draws. They were the 0-0 draw we had at West Brom in October and the 1-1 draw at home to Everton in December. There haven't been any red cards in any of his previous 18 games he's refereed involving Burnley, and so we'll be hoping for that to continue this weekend. And finally on this section, the video assistant referee will be Stuart Atwell.
Excellent.
Statman Dave's Stat of the Week.
Well, we're not going to leave it there. As always, you've got another bonus stat for us. So why don't you hit us with your stat of the week, Dave?
This week's stat is regarding this Saturday's match. It will be Burnley's 250th top-flight match of this millennium, or if you prefer, our 250th Premier League match, although we like to recognise that football did begin prior to 1992. For Burnley fans of a certain age who thought the Clarets might never make it back to the top division after a 33-year wait between relegation in 1976, going down the divisions, nearly going out, and then coming back to the top flight in 2009. It shows the hard work that has been done not only to get back to this level, but also to remain here as long as we have, with this being our 5th consecutive season at the top level after single season returns in 2009-10 and 2014-15.
Excellent. Good start. So this week we have an opposition view for you, and it comes from the Brighton fans podcast, Together BHA, and we got them to share their thoughts with us.
Opposition View.
Hello to the No Name Never podcast. Great name, by the way. I'm Josh with Together BHA. You sent me a bunch of notes over for the game this weekend, which is a big one for both of us. I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I can to try to give you the opposition take today. So the first question I got from you all was how our season has gone since we last played each other. The long story short is really it was a downward spiral before a 2021 revival, really. We played well most games. The story was pretty much the same. We played well. We played attractive football. We won the XG, as they constantly joked about, online and in articles, and generally played pretty well, but we just couldn't get results that matched our play. However, since 2021 came around, we really seem to have turned a corner, starting with the comeback against Wolves on January the 2nd. From 3-1 down at halftime, we came back to draw 3-3, and it seemed like there was a bit of a fire lit under the players after that. We've now played 6 games in January, excluding the Cups, and we've won 3 of those games, drawn 2 and lost 1 this calendar year. We did, of course, win the 2 cup games as well. And the only loss we've took this year actually came to Manchester City. And even that was just a 1-0 defeat. So In terms of how I think Potter is doing, I truly think Potter is building something very special on the South Coast. Of course, I am biased, right? You're probably rolling your eyes, like, of course he thinks that. But he does have a very exciting background. You know, he's already done that almost cliche football manager save, where he took some lowly Swedish team from the 4th division and beat Arsenal in Europe. And he plays football in a very entertaining way. You know, he's been given significantly less funds to play with than Chris Hughton ever had. And for the last year, especially since the pandemic began, has been asked to work with what he has at his disposal. You know, with the signings Chris Hughton failed to make work, and the youth academy that we have at our disposal. I think Graham Potter is the man for us. You know, even if we go down the same way you've stuck by Deitch for a long time, I think Potter is that man for us. And I think Tony Bloom, Albion fan through and through, as our owner, is the right owner to allow him to build such a project, at the Albion. We are very happy to have him for the most part. Especially since the current results, there's been a lot of people happier than ever. How the transfer window went for us, I would say it was just fine. I wanted a striker. Most Albion fans did. Scoring goals is definitely our weakness. But we knew it wouldn't be a likely scenario. You know, the finances across the Premier League, as you're well aware, are brutal currently. Due to the losses with COVID, I believe the Albion incurred another 20-30 million losses, just due to COVID alone. We ended up selling over £20 million worth of players this summer to try and recoup some of that. And we only spent £900,000 on incoming. So we've worked very hard to try and recoup some of those losses. So I didn't expect a great deal from the Albion. However, I am excited by the Moises Caicedo signing from Ecuador. He's young. He seems to be a very bright talent. Manchester United were in for him, but a lot of their negotiations broke down due to the agents in South America. The Albion had already recently signed a lad from the same club that he played at, Billy Arca. And we were due to that kind of relationship we already had, we were kind of able to swoop in and take him from underneath the big team's noses. So, either he is going to be one of those bright talents that will play alongside and form a mighty midfield alongside Bissouma, or he's going to end up being, one of those preemptive Bissouma replacements. So, yeah, the transfer window was fine, could have been better, but, with everything going on, it's not a surprise that we weren't particularly active. In terms of how we think we'll get on in the Cup next week against Leicester, this one's short and sweet. Depends on if Vardy plays. If Vardy is back, fit and ready to go, I think we'll get beat. If Vardy is not fit, I think we might nick it. I think we might win. What do we expect from Saturday's match? Despite the fact that we have just beaten Spurs and Liverpool back to back, it's going to be a tight one, right? Every game is tough in the Premier League, and the Albion struggle to break teams around us down. We've beaten Spurs, we've beaten Liverpool just yesterday, and yet we drop points against Fulham, we drop points against West Brom, we drop points against Sheffield United when they were down to 10 men, for goodness sake. So I expect that's probably going to be something that continues. I would probably expect it to end, 0-0 or 1-1. In terms of, whether I consider it a must-win, a draw away from home in any game in the Premier League to me is absolutely fine. And especially with our last two, I would definitely take a draw. It would be major progress to show that Potter is coaching this team to be able to beat teams around us as well. So obviously it would be a major kind of progress if we won. But I would expect a 0-0 or a 1-1 draw. In terms of what I expect from Burnley, same as always, disciplined, physical football, good stuff in terms of going forward with Chris Wood, Ashley Barnes. I will be missing the sight of Ashley Barnes in a blue and white shirt instead. It hurts me every time I see him play for Burnley because I liked him a lot at the Albion, and we couldn't give him the Premier League football he wanted at the time. So yeah, I expect that you will come over, or rather, you're at home, right? So I expect that you will do a good job defensively at shutting us down, and I think we'll probably do the same. And I expect, like I said, it will probably be a pretty 0-0, 1-1 draw. Thanks a lot for having me on. Good luck for the rest of the season, except for this weekend. And I'm sure we hopefully will speak next year if we're both Premier League teams.
Okay, Dave. So Brighton on Saturday. The phrase "must-win game" is thrown around a lot in football. Do you think this is a must-win? Do you think with Brighton's result last night, a point isn't enough? Do we need to kind of beat them to kind of keep them in touch and keep in touch with them, or do you think a point would actually not be a bad result against between two sides who've just both beaten Liverpool recently?
I don't think they're not ever must-wins until a lot later in the season. It'd be a nice to win. I think that certainly in terms of the teams around us, it's important that we do get points and wins against the teams around us in the table, especially games at home. So from that point of view, yes, it'd be a good one to win, but it won't be an easy match. We know that Brighton are on a reasonably good run themselves. Obviously, it's the Anfield Conquerors Derby, I'm calling it, bearing in mind that we've them and us have both beaten Liverpool at Anfield in the last week or two. It's going to be one of those games. It's going to be a tight game. I don't think there's going to be a lot of goals. It's both sides are capable of playing defensively and shutting up shop, but it's a case of who then takes the initiative and gets the first goal. It might even be one, Matt, where the first goal wins it. I don't see it being a high scoring game. If I had to give a prediction, I'm going to go for a 1-0 win to Burnley.
I'd take that. I'd take a 1-0. I think in terms of injuries and team selection, I think we'll probably see the similar side that started last night. I don't think anything's been said today to suggest that anybody who missed last night will be back fit enough to start on Saturday.
Yeah, I think the ones that are questionable are Wooden Barnes, obviously, and Taylor and Brownhill. And I think reading between the lines from the manager's press conference, it's likely to be a case of going in with the same team that we had against Manchester City, I would think.
Excellent. Well, fingers crossed, we'll get the 3 points from that and put a bit more distance between ourselves and that relegation zone.
Fantasy Premier League update.
So this week we can't bring you a proper Fantasy Premier League update because the game week is still in progress, but instead we've got one of our top 10 from the No Name Never Fantasy Premier League, Sean Danaher, here to talk you through how he's been so successful this season. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, wonderful to be here. Thank you.
So, what's been the secret to your success this year? Has it been pure chance, or have you been scrutinising the details and tweaking every week?
Well, I'm waiting for the bubble to burst. My big fear was that by the time I spoke to you, I might have dropped out the top 10 because some really high scores in there this week. And I'm still cursing myself for my Salah captaincy when if I'd have captained literally anyone else, I'd have got more points from them. So I think it's a mix. So I kind of started looking at it a lot more seriously when we're in lockdown and there was Project Restart, and obviously there was a lot more time to do fun things like have spreadsheets and look at fixtures and form and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a mix, really. I think there is that age-old debate of skill versus luck. I think this season it's very much a mixture of both. I think.
Did you play last year then? Were you in? Have you been playing Fantasy Premier League for a while?
So Fantasy Premier League. So last season was my first main season doing it. Really, I think I had quite a few years out from it. And last year was a very casual approach. So lots of missed deadlines, lots of just picking players who I thought I might like. Not really sure what some of the chips did, and then and again that luck bit came into it. I started having an all right season last year. So when when everything halted and we were locked down, I started taking it a little bit more seriously. And then this season, I suppose going right back to your first question, I am analysing fixtures. I am looking at stats. I am looking at form and all that sort of thing. So yeah,
good. Have you found this season harder to predict? Because there's been a lot of kind of random results, and home form seems to have gone out the window, home advantage even. So, have you found it going like away from what you expected, but although you've still been quite successful with it?
Yeah, it's been difficult. I think one of the stats that came out, in the last few days was this, this record amount of away wins. So normally when you look at Liverpool at home against Brighton, or dare I say it, Liverpool at home against Burnley, and think, well, home bankers, but these away wins just keep creeping up and up. And I think and this sounds really daft to say out loud, but it's almost like no one's playing really well. No one's going to hit 30 goals this season, for a player, and there's injuries that are creeping up. The schedule's chaos. We've already seen De Bruyne, go out for a few weeks. Kane, it looks like he's out for a little while now. Salah, barring his game last week, has not really been firing. So it's been really tricky. I think it's one of those seasons where people you might bank on aren't perhaps doing it as much, and yeah, it has felt very tricky at points, and I think this is where the luck's come in. Is I've just managed to kind of hit players in good form, and I think it's also been a case of sticking fast as well. I think it's easy to chase players sometimes, and maybe take hits to get those players in. The big an example was Harry Kane. So I've had a Harry Kane sat on my bench injured for the last 2 weeks, and the weekend it was should I get him out for Dominic Calvert-Lewin? Should I take the -4 points and get him in? And thankfully I didn't. Sometimes it's having a bit of patience and sticking to it, I suppose. But yeah, no, it's definitely been a tricky one this year.
Any further tips then for people, any kind of help for the remainder of the season that you could offer? Pearls of wisdom?
Pearls of wisdom. Oh, wow. I think
was sticking fast one, was just, maybe being a little less knee-jerky, a little bit more patient with some players, not going shut at them too quickly.
Yeah, I think there's definitely sort of risk and reward, and sometimes those strategies can pay off. I think one of the things I do is look at a lot of FPL Twitter accounts, and I think you see which way the wind's blowing sometimes. And I think a great tip I would give is question that. Sometimes it's really easy, and there's that fear of missing out, and I better get this player in, or I better drop him and put someone else in, and it's easy to get swept along with that. I think sometimes when you really step back and just think, do I actually believe this? Am I just going along with this because I don't want to be part of this sort of this fun little tidal wave of going for one player? So sticking fast, I think, is one. I think the other thing as well is I know this sounds really stupid, but just make good decisions. I think what I mean by that is captaining Salah last night was a good decision. It was brilliant. And he looked like he'd hit his 2 goals, and it's a home fixture, and then it just doesn't quite work out. So I think if you can justify it and it doesn't quite happen on the pitch, there's not a lot to be mad about, really. And ultimately, at the end of the day, don't let it ruin you. Don't let it ruin watching football for you. That'd be my biggest advice.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Well, all the best for the rest of the Fantasy Premier League season, and we might even speak to you again should you come top by the end of it all.
Amazing. No, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
So a big thanks there to Sean for offering his advice and thoughts on how he's approached the Fantasy Premier League this season. But we do have another new feature, which we started a couple of weeks ago, which is our Opposition 3 to watch. Dave, can you fill us in on who are Brighton's high-scoring performers this season?
Yeah, we can bring details of the highest point scorers so far of the season in the Fantasy Premier League, and up to and including game week 22, they are Neil Maupay with 74 points, Leandro Trossard also has 74 points, and Solly March is third with 69 points. The first 2 both started in Brighton's win at Anfield on Wednesday, although Solly March remains out of action with a knee injury, so maybe it should be 2 to watch rather than 3, because Solly March isn't going to be involved. But there may be 2 of Brighton's highest performers who we need to keep an eye out for on Saturday.
Absolutely. And apologies again that as we're recording before the end of this midweek round of fixtures, we're not able to bring you a detailed score update for the FPL this week, but we'll have a more thorough update for you in our next preview show, which will be for the away trip to Crystal Palace.
Statman Dave's quiz question.
Moving on to our penultimate section is the quiz question. Dave, you've got yet another question for us this week to test everybody's Clarets trivia.
Yes, this week's question is, following this weekend, we play Bournemouth in the FA Cup at home on Tuesday. But we want to know in which year Burnley met Brighton in the FA Cup competition for the only time in our history. That season, the Clarets progressed after a replay win at Turf Moor.
Ooh, I certainly don't know that one off the top of my head. I have to give that one a bit of thought. If people do know, how can they submit their answers?
Well, the best way to get in touch, you can either tweet us or preferably send us a direct message on Twitter so no one sees your answer. That's at NoNayNever on Twitter. Email us, podcast@noNayNever.net, or you can also reply to the post for this preview show on either the No Nay Never Facebook page or on YouTube, and we'll reveal the correct answer to that question at the start of our next preview show.
Moving on to finally any community news, and of course with Sean on the programme this week, we wanted to take the opportunity to talk to him about Burnley FC in the community kitchen and food bank which he manages. So Sean, over to you. The floor is yours. Our listeners will want to know how they can support you and how logistically they can get the donations to you and what in particular you need in the coming weeks.
No, amazing. Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to everyone again. And we are absolutely having a big old push at the moment. So our facilities continue to remain closed as they have done throughout the pandemic, but we are continuing to help people in the community with our food parcels. So sending those out at a rapid rate at the moment, including getting them out to schools that need them for half term as well. People can still get donations to us and they can do that safely. If you go on the website, if you go and find Burnley Community Kitchen, there's a full list which we've just updated of collection points and donation bins scattered around the town. And if anyone is inclined to help, I would also point them to the Just Giving page, where you can make a kindly donation or become a regular giver and one of our food bank friends. But as ever, the work in the community kitchen is absolutely reliant on the great people of Burnley, and any support you offer us is always really greatly appreciated. And you're helping a lot of people.
Thanks for all that information, Sean, and I'm sure our listeners will do what they can to support those who are in need at this time. Thanks again for joining us this week, and all the best with everything down at the kitchen and the food bank.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So that's all we have time for on the preview show this week. My thanks go firstly to Sean Danaher, the manager of the Burnley FC in the community food bank and community kitchen, for joining us to offer his advice and thoughts on the Fantasy Premier League this season, and also information on how you can support the food bank during these tough times. Thanks to Together BHA for their opposition view. Thanks, as always, to Dominic Walker, Turf Moor Stadium announcer, for his specially recorded preview show announcements. But primarily, my thanks go to Statman Dave for getting this show together, preparing the stats and the facts and everything that you need as we get ready for Saturday, 3:00 game against Brighton. I've been producer Matt. This has been the preview show from the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.